We're live.
Okay. Hi, I am Angie Mueller, and along with Alexis Jones of Conley-Jones, we will be moderating this panel, which is Out of the Shadows, Celebrating Women, Inventors, and Innovation. Thank you all for coming and joining us. This is the last day of the Autumn 2025 conference. And we not only are celebrating women inventors, but also autumn of having 50 years of innovating.
In conjunction with Autumn's 50th anniversary, we are here today to celebrate women inventors and innovators all over the world by highlighting their amazing work and contributions, whose genius and diligence have created some world and life-changing innovations.
We are thrilled to have 3 exceptional inventors on our panel today. And what we'll do is briefly walk through so that they can introduce themselves. Dr. Zhang.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Grace Zhang from the George Washington University. Right now, I'm the professor of mechanical and aerospace engineering. I also serve as associate dean for research in the School of Engineering. So very glad to meet you all. So today, I want to share my personal experience and also want to learn other excellent inventors' experience. Hopefully, we can inspire our young women fellows and many other people. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Hoemann.
Yes, I'm Carolyn Hoemann, and I'm from George Mason University in the Department of Bioengineering. And my background in inventing started with a biotech company where I worked on tissue engineering for cartilage. And I'm continuing my research now into other areas of chronic disease, including arthritis and cardiovascular disease. And I'm really excited to participate in this panel. I have a background in chemistry, molecular biology, cell biology. So I'm more on the biology spectrum of engineering, but I have learned that engineering is an important part of the training that leads to inventions.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Dr. Deandra Cassone. I go by Dee Dee. I've had kind of an interesting career where I've been both in industry and in academia full time. And so I've seen both sides kind of this inventive process. Currently, I'm just an adjunct professor at Kansas State University. I'm semi-retired. I retired from the University of Missouri, being the director of their research activities in biomedical informatics. And so doing that as well as some of the other fun things that I want to do. But I'm excited to be involved. It was 𝗵𝗃𝐕𝐄 that I dealt with at Sprint with the patents that I received, and just amazing in terms of that. But I'm hoping that our discussion today will promote and make women really believe that they can accomplish and they can go through this patenting process and do it successfully. So I just appreciate being here and being invited.
Thanks, Dee Dee. Many inventors, researchers, and those in the tech transfer industry are navigating uncertain times, but innovation always finds a way to shine through, and that is what we are here to celebrate today.
We've gone through the slide deck quite quickly, but the slide deck, the PowerPoint slide deck that we are using today is available on the Autumn app. If you have a look under the course materials, and for those who've joined us on the live stream, if you look and use the link that Julie's posted in the chat, you can actually access all the information that's on there. We want to just focus and really have a conversation with those in the room and those joining us on the live stream. So let's get into it.
Yeah, absolutely. And we welcome your questions. To ask a question, if you are here in the room, please raise your hand. Marianne Privet, there she is, right here. We'll bring the microphone to you, and it's kind of going to help us manage questions from the audience. For those of you on the live stream, please look for the comment box, and you can type your question in there, and Julie will pose the question to our panelists. So with that, let's get going on question number 1, I think, before we invite the questions from the audience. But as we speak, please feel free to raise your hand. We want it to be interactive, engaging. So do we have is there a first slide for the questions? If not, I've got the list.
You've got the
Okay.
list.
All right. So question number one, describe your first experience as women inventors. Can you speak to your first experience as a woman inventor and what compelled you to submit your first concept for patent consideration? Who wants to speak? You want to, Dr. Cassone?
Very good. So I have an interesting background. My father was head of the industrial engineering department at K-State for 20 years prior to him going into consulting work, and he does commercial, did commercial residential real estate. So doing things better, faster, cheaper, smarter was part of what I knew growing up. That's the way we looked at everything, in terms of this. So from a background perspective, some of the studies that we did when we did consulting work really engaged a lot of different concepts and some very innovative ways that solutions were put together for clients here in DC and around the country. So when I got to Sprint, I was actually in the project management office, where you might not think that there are a whole lot of patentable sorts of ideas that are coming from. And my boss at the time, Paul Saponaro, suggested on one of the models that I had built for the project management office that this would be patentable. And my father still being alive at the time, they said I might be able to patent this, and I'm like, what? And we both kind of chuckled, and then went to talk to Michael. And, as part of that, then started to see the nature of the innovation process from a patenting perspective, the types of elements that were necessary to have a concept be recognized as a patent. So went through that first process with Michael at Sprint, and it then set me on a path to say, oh, okay, there's a lot of other things that I could start to look at and kind of look at.
It just took one.
Pardon?
It just took one.
It just took one, and I said,
you were hooked.
I was completely hooked. So I will say, having great patent attorneys makes all the difference. They can extract ideas out from you. They can help you formulate what you're thinking. Don't hesitate to rely on these experts, because they truly provide value in terms of what you can value associated with your success in this. So go ahead. Sorry.
So I've been spending some reading too, looking into why there aren't as many women inventors as men. And one of the reasons cited was the lack of women in jobs of engineering and design and development. So I just wanted to mention that, because I feel very privileged that one of the first jobs I had coming out of my postdoc was actually research and development in a small biotech company. So my job was actually meant to help create this so-called picket fence around our intellectual property, which was really to create a new hydrogel for cartilage repair. And what happened was we did the pivot. We started off with an idea of having a hydrogel with cells encapsulated, and soon found out that kind of blocked Mother Nature from repairing the wound. And so what happened is I worked with my husband, and he came up with a creative idea at a conference where he saw if we mix polysaccharide into blood, maybe we can create a new type of blood clot to heal cartilage wounds. So in fact, my role in that project was enabling this idea. So that's how I earned my way onto the first pivotal patent. It's been cited over 200 times. And I also learned about what it is to create a claim. And we were very surprised to see no one else had claimed before mixing polysaccharide into blood to create a hybrid clot. So that was a very strong claim. It was one short sentence. And another thing I found is that the part of the barriers to women becoming inventors might also have to do with the networks to develop trust-based interactions, because creating a company is often based on networking and trustful relationships. So I feel as though it's very important to find an environment where you can thrive with your creative ideas and that you're supported in that.
Okay. My first real experience in patent process came through, I think, during my PhD study. At that time, I was working on a very novel DNA-based nanotube for biomedical application. I was very excited about its potential. And then based on my advisor's inputs, I contacted the tech commercialization office at Brown University at that time to send out an inquiry email whether it was patentable. And then I think my request was turned down at that time. Although I think the office evaluated that very thoroughly, mentioned many of the results had been published, made it really hard to patentable. And then I think initially it was indeed very discouraging, but I think that process indeed I learned a lot, especially in academia. Researcher, we normally prioritize like publishing our funding first. But if you really think your study have the real application, the commercialization potential, you need to plan ahead, submit the patent application first and then publication. So talk to the tech transfer officer at your university. And then when I set up my lab at the George Washington University 15 years ago, I think the George Washington University, the tech commercialization office, I saw the director, Brian, is here today. So they did an excellent job in educating our faculty member, our researcher students to do the patent application. Especially in our school, we have the annual research showcase. So the undergraduate students, PhD students, postdoc, they're gonna give the poster presentation about their research. I think their office also set up some award, like a commercialization entrepreneurship award. They talk to our students to learn their idea, encourage them to submit a patent application. So many of my former PhD students fully get involved in that process. And also they provide some training session like a workshop and also 𝗖𝗃 activity. They are very important. So my PhD students and I also participated in the national, like the NSF 𝗖𝗃 by helping with the office at university. So I think that's the education process is very critical. And then we submit a lot of pretty good patent application later. Yeah.
No, thank you. I have a question for the panel, and please, if anyone has a question at any point, do actually put your hand up. We've gone through how each one of you became inventors. Obviously, was this a plan? Was it, or I'm going to be an inventor? Or is it, I'm doing my research and all of a sudden, you know, you have something novel, you realize, okay, this is the path that I'm going to take. So you follow it through. At any point, did you turn around and say like, nah, I'm a researcher. This isn't my bag. This isn't my path. This is for someone else to take. It sounds as though it was quite natural when each one of you have gone through it. But what was in your mind thought in that process?
Sure. So, like I said, growing up, it was a problem-solving environment. Yeah. So I just grew up, there are issues, there are systems, how do we put things in place so we can do them better? I think there was this incremental mind shift in terms of inventing and actually making something patentable. That's what Alexander Graham Bell did. It's not what I did in terms of problem solving. And so it did that incremental change of perspective is something that was important to me. And then I said, oh, okay, this is similar to what I would do in research. And, now we're just taking it down a different avenue. So that would be my response.
I must admit that if I had stayed in academia and gone for the traditional postdoc, I probably wouldn't have patented. I probably would have published my work and gotten academic grants. And I think that it really was my job description, that was what I was being paid to do. So I think really the workplace, the tasks that you're assigned have an influence on that, unless you are, well, they did say that only 7% of academics patent. And,
Yeah.
you know, there are a lot of people out there that aren't in academics that patent. And maybe academia is actually something you have to overcome to want to innovate and patent your work, which slows down your publication process.
Sure. And the question is, should it be part of the process? Because the thing is, you know, Dr. Zhang talked about a very nurturing environment where even PhD students are being prepared to understand that whatever they come up with, if to get it out to impact means that you would speak to your technology transfer office.
Oh, the tide is changing.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
the tide is changing.
It's not the case. I know it's not the case in every situation. It also speaks to, because, you know, you mentioned that had you stayed in academia, you probably would have published. There are multiple parameters that probably would influence that. It could be the actual setup, the policy, the structure, the expectations, but also something in us to say, I'm not an inventor, and that element of imposter syndrome that may come through. And I think it's really, this is why I was asking the question to try and understand when you came to that situation, were you thinking this, yeah, I'm uncomfortable because I don't know what's going to happen next. I'm relying on others, or it was just like, yeah, I'm going to go with it.
But what are the seeds of innovation anyway? Because they talk about knowledge burden and needing to gain enough knowledge to come up with a creative idea.
Yeah.
Is it mutually exclusive in academia? I mean, you're talking about publication versus patenting, but you can do both, right?
Absolutely.
Right?
And with the correct timing.
Absolutely.
But it means communication all the way. I mean, in that level of trust to liaise with the office and say, I think there's going to be something here. But I think it's a two-way street. It's you know, the researcher liaising with the office and saying, you know, this is what I'm thinking of doing. But the office also saying, I foresee that possibly you could have whatever. I'm probing. That's why, you know, the discussion with regards to having a supportive patent attorney, when you have that three-way conversation between the technology transfer office, the inventor, and the patent attorney, it's a beautiful thing when there is synergy, where there is like playing off each other, and you can ask those questions. An inventor will be looking, because their field of expertise is quite narrow, so they'll be looking that it can solve this problem. A patent attorney can see the potential applications. And then, you know, the technology transfer office and the person there will be helping to facilitate that there are steps to put that in, and knowing the drivers that academia requires, the currency's publication. So it's managing that entire process.
Well, so do we have any, Julie, are there any questions from?
Oh, I can see someone's got their hand up here. Please
right.
come to the mic.
Here.
Oh, thanks.
Hi, so my question is that a lot of universities are now incorporating elements of commercialization in the faculty, like tenure track pathway. They want to have some, let's say, patents or invention disclosures or some commercialization output counting towards a tenure track faculty's progression. Do you think that helps in encouraging the conversation with the tech transfer office?
I know I have an answer, but the thing is, like, I will ask.
Yeah, I do think, especially I heard some university like School of Engineering, they even have a 实习 for innovation and entrepreneurship. So I think from the university consideration, we highly encourage the faculty member participate in commercialization, because we really want our research not only in the lab, but have the real impact. That's also critical. But I'm also serve as a 实习 for research. From the administrator consideration, we also need to balance a little bit like a conflict interest, because the faculty member, they also need to do the research teaching, and then probably they're going to utilize some university resources to do the commercialization. Sometimes we can cost sharing that, but it depends. But that can be handled for sure by university. We definitely highly encourage, because sometimes the students initially, they probably don't understand anything about the patent, that process, or maybe they don't understand what's the real impact, although they maybe know some, but the true real impact that they maybe not very familiar. I think the faculty member is very critical to train them, let them know. So that can be how you can apply the patent, talk to the tech transfer office. So that's the faculty member is the first step, I think is very critical for that process. Yeah.
I just have one more comment about that. I think universities are recognizing that we need to get discoveries out of the literature and lab books and into the public domain in terms of products that help treat people and make an impact in people's lives. And I think that the cultural change that's going on in universities is recognizing that you can't do that without translational research.
Yeah.
But I think there's one thing about saying they want that and another thing about knowing how to get there.
Yeah. Well, I'll put it out there. You know, if you ask any researcher, why are they doing their research? Are we going to have medicines available through publication? I don't think so. So, in answer to your question, it should have been something where it's facilitated to happen anyway. The challenge that we have is that with the systems that we have, a lot of it is focused on teaching and research. And that third mission, which is to ensure that anything that is novel, that can positively impact society, is taken through, and that's usually via the technology transfer office. That should be part and parcel with the other two missions, not seen as a third optional. So with regards to promotion, really, why is it an addition rather than something that was there right from the outset? Not every researcher is going to be a translational researcher. Some will be where it's discovery research, so it's that earlier stage, but someone should be able to take it forward. And I think what we have to do is make sure that that happens more and it's seamless. So the expectations with the timescales, the measurements of success, whether that's publication, whether that's patents, whether that those are innovations, we have it realistic. So we're not expecting a translational researcher to have publications coming out every year, because it takes a long time for translational research to take place, but also for you to file that patent. Yeah.
Yeah. Is this on?
Yes.
Yeah, it is. Hi, Dolores. I come from Slovenia, so a small country, pretty tiny in terms of the share of commercialization and so on. But I just want to share two things, because I think it's super important we have these discussions also inside the TTO community. So my first is, this was a few years ago, we did research on patenting and licensing data in Japan, right? We had data from 2 university, micro-level data. And so we were looking at that data and asking ourselves, okay, how many of these were patented by women, right? And how many of the licensed technologies, right, have a woman inventor or woman that is leading that team, right? And it was a fraction, right? 2 universities, 20 years of data. Anyone cares to get the number of those that were licensed?
Yes.
10. 10. There were hundreds of licensing agreements. The second one is a research we've done in Slovenia on this. So we were just asking TTOs, do you see as part of your mandate knowing that women inventors at universities also struggle, right? Do you see as part of your mandate to actively support and have active policies that are related to kind of encouraging women in specific to patent and license? Answer, we've never thought about this, was the predominant answer. Thank you.
Well, so a question from Matt. What have universities done for any of you to help support you, and what could they do better to drive you to innovate more?
So I don't necessarily have an answer, just because my experiences have been 100% in industry.
Right. So you
And
speak to that.
so from that perspective, the level of encouragement, it was non-gender specific. I mean, we would have individuals coming through, you know, Michael himself, Steve Funk, other individuals at Sprint that would give patent presentations. So we all were aware. Yeah, it was simply an assumption of value and kind of take it forward
In industry.
in industry. So we didn't necessarily have, I didn't see it. Maybe it existed.
From the
I didn't
academic
notice.
side.
Yeah, but I didn't notice it.
I think that's a very important point because I've read that the Office of Chief Economist published in 2022 that if there were the same number of women inventors as male inventors, they estimate that we could increase the number of licensed or awarded patents and commercializable patents by 24%, and that the per capita gross domestic product would increase by 2.7%. So and why is that? It's just having more patents approved will lead to more commercializable products, which is important for our economy. And my technology transfer office, there's some member, David Grossman here. So it's very complicated, your question, actually, because there are such things as predatory licensing, where companies come in to license your technology in order to shelve it and get rid of competition. So part of the role of OTT is not just to help you file a patent and make sure the claims are well crafted, but also to help watch out for what is the licensing agreement and what does the company own and how is it going to be sort of the business deals that come later.
And when it's going to happen as well.
Yeah, the timing, yes.
Yeah, well, you know, there is a role, even if it's not led by the inventor, when it's licensed like that, there is feeding in, but it's a challenge to do that. But yeah, for sure. Dr. Zhang.
So at the George Washington University, in my school, we have two centers. One is called the Center for Women Engineers. The other is Innovation Center inside in our school. I think that two centers are very important, provide the support, resources, leadership to helping the women students, faculty member, staff member to do the innovation, all the stuff. And regarding to the woman inventor, the lower portion is, I think in the engineering field, we normally don't have a lot of like a students, researcher as a woman, so it's underrepresented group. But right now the situation become better. At least for the George Washington University, I saw the data, like for the class 2025, we have 45% of undergraduate students are women. So that's pretty very encouraging. So in the future, you're probably gonna see more women in PhD, postdoc, different things. So I believe you're gonna have more entrepreneur come out from women. Yeah, so that's the.
One other piece to add to that. So I don't want to paint a picture of flowers and roses in terms of women inventors. One of the things that, although it was addressed really from a non-gender specific perspective, we would have patent lunches at Sprint for those people that had filed or had awarded. So, celebration once a year, those individuals. And the first time I went, I looked around the room and I counted maybe 10 women out of 300 in that room that had actually done that. So, although it was promoted, that did not necessarily mean that it was universal in terms of women going ahead and filing. So I didn't want to,
I just wanted to add one more thing that was very surprising to me in my reading was an article coming out of the Yale School of Management. And the first author is Jensen in 2018, published very surprising work because she, actually it was three authors, looked into the demographics of patents that were awarded. And what they found is that there are single inventor patents whose first name, if the first name was clearly female, like Susan or Carolyn, that they were significantly less likely to have their patent awarded than if the single inventor had an ambiguous name, like Robin, and they took that as evidence of patent examiner bias. Actually, the examiner, and not only that, the future patents were more frequently citing patents with male inventors than female inventors. So there is this cultural change that needs to happen where it's recognized that women's ideas are just as strong and creative as men's ideas.
Yeah, and that's in all of us as well. Yeah.
I just had a quick question, but first I was really excited to hear that each of you in your first experience had someone encouraging you to submit and to sponsor. I was concerned about Dr. Zhang. You said that you had a problem, you got it submitted, your first was in, they came back and said, well, you've published, it's sort of out. And then it doesn't sound like you actually submitted again for years until you became your own team. And is that, did I hear that correctly? Or was there something more in the middle? Because to me, that's a spot of tech transfer office that even if you have a new inventor, especially a woman inventor who comes in and there is a publication problem, I would hope there would be a lot of reinforcement and extra time spent going, this is really great work. This is something that we really want to look for. We want to see this again. Here are ways we can avoid this, but encourage you to resubmit rather than discourage you, hey, yeah, nothing here, and you're years later before you come back, where obviously you have so much to contribute. So I was curious, is that part of the experience, and is there a lesson we can draw from that?
So that's related to my first experience as a mid patenting. So that's a long time ago. So I probably need to find out the email, maybe not very easy to find it. So I think before I had no idea about what's the patent really like. I heard a lot of people have the patents. I really admire that. So I thought, oh, how I can get a patent? And then I think my advisor told me, so maybe we can try submitting inquiry form to the TTO office over there. And then I submit. I think it's a simple one. At that time, just a simple inquiry email. And then I think they probably do some search, the publication and the evaluation, because there are already have many publications, because I was a PhD student, but I'm not the first PhD student to work on that nanomaterial. So my former lab mate, they already graduated. They also published some, but I work on different direction. And then I think at that time, they just mentioned, seems right now is not good timing to apply that. But I think maybe I can get more information. But I think through that process, I think it's very important. I learn a lot. More importantly, as I mentioned, the education, the awareness for the students is very critical for the patent process. So that education can be from the technology commercialization office, can be from the faculty, the advisor part, especially like my PhD advisor and also the postdoc at Rice, later at Harvard Medical School. They are all male, actually, but doesn't matter. So they had a lot of experience on the entrepreneurship part. They all have the startup company, some very successful. So from that process, I also learn a lot. So when other people talk to me about the startup company, although the detail I don't know, but at that time, but I don't feel it's very, maybe I'm scared or it's maybe too complicated, but I think my advisor already did that. So maybe in the future when I set up my lab, I can do it as well. So I think that's the role model effect is very critical. Yeah.
Thanks, everyone. I have two questions. So firstly, in the course of your career in your faculty, have you seen changes of, I say, other women being inspired through your own journey? And have you seen changes in terms of women coming to you and saying how you've gone through this, etc.? And the second part is, I've often got caught up in I guess, negotiating with the PI for a lot of the younger women researcher of taking them away. So we do have programs in our tech transfer team of Innovators program, etc. But I've struggled to convince the PI to let their women researcher participate. And one of the things that I've struggled is just negotiating, and everyone feels that this will take their time away from research. But in fact, the program is designed that it will help them identify it will help them identify things in their research that can take them through the commercialization journey. So if you have any tips on negotiating with the PIs on getting them into the program, that'll be great. Thanks.
Two loaded questions.
I'm actually not sure. You're saying, are women approaching me and saying you're an inspiration for patenting? Or I don't know, but my best recognitions lately have been in academics. But I think, yeah, it was actually the OTT that approached me to let me know about grant opportunities in translational research. And I was approached by people who are carrying out the I-Corps program at my university. So I think that was a really great segue for me taking that step here in the United States, because my first patenting was actually happening in Canada in a Canadian biotech company.
So I think based on my personal experience, the tips related to the woman inventor for the negotiation and any other things related to the commercialization, sometimes it's not very easy, because the woman inventor, normally they face a lot of like more challenge when you balance your work and life. So like me, I need to do the research. We also need to teach and many service as the editor board, the editor-in-chief, and also society. Serve as associate dean is another additional very heavy administrative role over there. And then I think sometimes you probably need to consider like a collaboration. So don't do that by yourself. That's very important. It's really hard. You can do everything by yourself. The collaboration is very critical. And more importantly, I think collaboration with the tech transfer office, the entrepreneurship office is also very critical, because they have rich expertise, all of the information, or maybe the connection with the industry. So that's very important resources. So can help you to get started. So that's, I think that's very important. Yeah, just talk to other people, collaborate with other people. Although right now, even for me, the negotiation part is still not very easy. Yeah, but I think don't be afraid to do that. Talk to other people, get advice is very critical.
Sorry, I'm just going to pinch a microphone to make. And one thing I've heard, because I think what you need really is male allies to understand the impact on women. And one thing I've heard that's helpful is reverse mentoring. It doesn't necessarily have to be around gender, I don't think, but having a PI appreciate the experience of the junior members of staff may be helpful, maybe. So that's just one thing I thought of.
And I think there's a lot to be said from celebrating success and talking more about, you know, the path. It's not necessarily just everything that went right, but also the challenges that are going to be faced. So managing expectations. We talked about researchers, younger researchers. If they see it, they can be it, and representation does matter. So I think although it's a very busy world, managing, teaching, research, and then that entrepreneurial aspect, I think where we get the opportunities, tap into the comms office, the marketing office, even the TTO, and get them to write something quite simple. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to disclose everything, but I think it's to encourage those that are looking, what are my options? Am I going to follow in this path? And what's possible as well?
Actually, that makes me, I'm sorry, I'm not going think about this concept of elbowing your way forwards. And I think that peer mentoring is a really important role there. And women, like explaining things, or just to those young female entrepreneurs out there, just to know that get the information. Don't be afraid to ask. Insist on transparency and know what the game is, because often you wind up feeling like you're playing a game and everybody knows the rules except for you. And so that's another really important thing that I found when I was a grad student at MIT, is that there was a group of women engineers, and the women faculty were willing to talk to the students openly about their own experience.
Hello, my name is Ozan. I'm one of the fellows, LifeArc fellows that are filling this room. And first of all, thank you for your insightful session. And I'm really great. It's really inspiring. You made remarkable advancements in your fields, apparently. And I would love to hear your perspective on what initially gave you the confidence to entrust your institution's technology transfer office and the professionals with the commercialization of your works live. And what was the initial icebreaker, and how should we, as the future technology transfer managers, how should we approach, especially to women investors, to build that trust in order to be make that trust better? Thank you.
Go ahead. Now, I go back, my experiences are all industry, from that perspective. I guess the only, there's an aspect of this that I'd like to add in terms of, as individuals are working through things like the tech transfer, the commercialization offices, those types of things. I've seen numerous people say enough's enough, and they go out on their own. And so sometimes to get across barriers, you may not be able to. And so then you start to make a decision as to whether you want to continue in an academic career or if you want to venture out into the fully entrepreneurial career. So.
Yes, and you mentioned about trust, but on the other hand, this is sort of more like an alliance. So I think it goes both ways, that the OTT also has to trust that the people putting forth the ideas are honestly endeavoring to make it to go the whole way, which is, in the beginning, the valleys of death are not visible. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs are translational research at the beginning. It sounds like a great idea. And as you progress, this whole idea of pivot seems to be like a new idea that even if you start off, you're very creative, very smart, and if your initial idea starts going south, that you can come up with another idea and keep it going. So I think that's another thing that I've seen shifting in the recent past.
So I think based on my experience, the trust can be built by many processes. Initially, it can start from the patent application process, because some patent application may be pretty smooth, but based on my experience, some indeed not very smooth. It's very time consuming because the patent examiner, they're gonna have a lot of questions. Some, I think from the scientific viewpoint, we can very easily to answer that. Some maybe not very easy. I think we need the TTO office help with us. So I think during that process, we can build a lot of the confidence, the trust between the office and the students, the faculty member. So I think that's very important. Yeah.
Hi, so it was mentioned earlier that there was very few women in the engineering department, but I'm a biomedical scientist, and on the opposite, there is a lot of women actually doing biomedical sciences. If you look at an undergraduate class, there will be 60 to 70% of women, and then we keep going to postgraduate and doing a postdoc or being scientists overall, whether it's in academia or industry. So my question is, how do you explain that there is so many women in biomedical sciences, and then so little of them are actually going forward with creating something that can be commercialized? And how do you think we should, what should be done to just close that gap so it's more,
Yep.
yeah, we got the question.
So they go all the way through, yeah.
Yeah, your question is an excellent, to bring up the experience that we've had recently about Katalin Kariko, who shared the Nobel Prize with Drew Weissman for developing the mRNA vaccine technologies. And her story is that, in fact, I looked up her patent from 2007, and she was at the University of Pennsylvania. And she came up with the very original idea of how to make messenger RNA that did not elicit a really inflammatory response that allowed it to become like a useful technology in medicine. And what happened was she made this amazing discovery, and she wasn't able to get academic funding for her research and had to leave. And she went back to Germany to work for BioNTech, which kept a collaboration with Dr. Weissman. They shared the Nobel Prize for that discovery. But I think part of the problem maybe had been the obstacle of knowing, maybe it was grantsmanship, I honestly don't know, but that the academic community was unable to recognize the value of her work. So these are challenges that at MIT, they used to call it the kiss of death if you got a teaching award. And I hope it's not true that it's another kiss of death to decide to go translational, because it does take, like the panelists have mentioned, a lot of time. And if the patent is not seen as having as much academic value as a peer-reviewed paper, then the faculty member may be disadvantaged. So I think attitudes have to shift in that way.
I think also, you mentioned several things, that there are a good number of researchers who are female. It's just that they don't progress career-wise. So
Take the next step.
yes, and exactly. And you have to have a look, really, the setup that's there. One of the reasons that I left the lab was the short-term contracts. That was going to kill me because of the uncertainty. Just as soon as you're digging deep, you halfway through, you have to also focus on looking for your next role, or where the funding is going to come from. Also, that push to have publications, because the currency of academia is having those publications, which does not work well with translational research, where you need to have the patents, you need to have the data, and it takes time. The other aspect, when it comes to women, they're usually approaching an age where if they're going to have a family, that feeds in. And best will in the world, whoever and whatever setup you have at home, a lot of it lays on the woman. So with all these aspects feeding in, I'm sure that's contributing to having less women becoming PIs, or even wanting to, in that really challenging environment, which can, it's going to impinge on work-life balance and everything else. I can see that there are quite a few questions.
So Brian Kublitz from George Washington. I'm happy to share we have 3/5 of our office are women. And I wanted to ask, if you've had experiences interacting with women in tech transfer offices or at patent law firms, and what impact you think that makes on the success of increasing women patenting and commercializing.
One of the, at least in Montreal, we had the OTT department had another firm called 𝗵𝗿𝗄 that was like valorization of the work that we were doing, and the lead was a woman, and she was an entrepreneur, venture capitalist, and I think that really, it was really inspiring. And there was a venture capital group that invested in our company, and one of the venture capitalists was a woman, and all of these things are really important, I think.
Hi, I'm Jerry Vaughn with Conley Rose. Thank you all so much for being. Thank you all so much for being here. Sorry. I think I have two parts. One is a comment and one is a question. The first comment is, and they're completely unrelated, so let's take that out. The first comment is that one of the biggest tools that I've seen that I think is impactful is getting out to to women especially, what a patent actually can be. It is not a unicorn. And some people have they think for some reason you get a patent and suddenly you've got control over this sphere of the universe and you're a wizard. It's not like that, but it is important. And so I think that's one of the biggest tools is having people understand what it's important is, why is it important. And I know a lot of women in industry where they use patents the same way that academia uses peer-reviewed publications to show their productivity, and it's really good for them. The second part of it has to do with grant writing. And I have heard the idea floated that, where you get to the ROI section where we all blue sky what we're doing and how it will change the face of the earth, that maybe some of that should actually come down into more description of how you get from here to there, even if it's just focus specifically on how you can take what I've done in the lab and move it forward. And part of that I got training at when I was at St. Jude, because St. Jude is really into that's the cornerstone. What you're doing on the bench had better have a way to find its way towards a treatment. And it's drilled into your head from the moment you enter the hospital. But what would you think about a more rigorous examination of grants for feasible ways towards commercialization?
Maybe I can comment that a little bit. I think thank you very much for all of the thoughts and comments. I think they are really good because let the people be aware of their research impact. The patent capacity is very important. Sometimes people don't realize that at the initial point. Related to the question, so like for the grant application, you maybe mentioned for the review process, put more focus on. I think I'm not sure, so it's feasible for some grants, for example, like the National Science Foundation, the NIH, they have the specified like the commercialization related funding, especially like NIH, they have the R1, allow the university collaborate with the industry. Normally the funding, the pay line is much higher than the other regular one. So I believe for that type of grant, they already consider the real, like the commercialization potential. We already have many mechanisms related to that, like STTR, SBR, but for the regular grant application, so right now I think they have one review criteria. It's called the significance. So normally the reviewer, majority they are doctor, like from NIH, from NSF, they are faculty member, researcher, scientist. So they evaluate the significance. Sometimes it's indeed related to the clinical application, sometimes related to the biomedical and also the society impact. But I don't think they put a lot, because some research, they indeed do the fundamental study, so probably don't have like much related to the application part. But I think that's pretty good idea. Maybe mention that the potential pathway, especially for the NIH application. So they consider that right now they consider like whether you study include some animal study, like a smaller, even bigger. So they consider maybe can close to the future translational research. So I think that's good point.
I can speak for a lot of the translational funders. They do require you to have that. For the large amounts that's actually being funded, because you have to, unless you are working collaboratively with your TTO, with the expertise to take it forward. So whether that's the clinicians, whether it's any other specialists, it means that you are developing technology that, unless you plan and have a strategy in how it's going to reach, for example, whoever's going to take it to market, it is that it's not going to happen. And that also means looking at the landscape where you sit. Are you a me too? Are you going to supersede what's already there? But translational researchers are doing that more and more. In the UK and Europe, a lot of the funding is also, particularly at the early stages, supported by charities. So as it becomes more translational, it becomes more narrow because it's deeper pockets, and those are the large translational researchers. LifeArc, who I work with and who I work for, does fund translational research, but also many others in the sector. So you're talking the Wellcome Trust, Gates, the Medical Research Council, and the application is much more sophisticated. So you would have the Gantt charts, you have to have the input of project managers, you have to have the input of the Technology Transfer Office, but also you need to have a path for the technology. So knowing where it's going to be protected, when it needs to be de-risked, who's going to fund it at the next stage. So it does encourage that application. But as with any translational research, it encourages collaboration and to bring in the expertise that's required to take it all the way through.
Thank you for your time. our office has recently renewed our outreach efforts, and part of some initial benchmarking suggested exactly what everyone in this room is going to expect, which is that women are dramatically underrepresented and that they quite frankly represent low-hanging fruit if we want to increase our outreach and we want to increase our invention pipeline. So my question for you is, do you participate in any women's-based or gender-based professional organizations or faculty organizations, such as an Association for Faculty Women or Commission on the Status of Women? And if so, are you guys having conversations about translational research as a means of a priority for women in your institution? And is your tech transfer office in conversation with you? And if they aren't, would that be beneficial?
So I'll just say that unfortunately at George Mason, I have not been participating in such organizations. I think there are organizations to support people. They're not gender-based. So it has occurred to me that I could initiate one. I don't have time, but it has occurred to me that this is something that's missing and is needed. So I thank you for your question.
So for me, I also didn't participate on the specific society related to the woman inventor, different things. But I think many of current professional society, like I participate in the biomedical engineering society. Last year, I served as the conference co-chair over there. So many society right now, they have a lot of activity involve the women students, faculty member get involved. They have host many events session over there. I participated in that event, but not a specific society. Yeah. Thank you.
So I take it from a little more of a hands-on perspective. As a professor, one of the courses that I teach is engineering entrepreneurship. We spend a whole lecture on IP, talking about that, but also about that entire innovation process and what that means to encapsulate that innovation into an actual business. And so, you know, it would not necessarily be one-on-one, although I'm encouraging all of my students, you know, to do this specifically addressed towards women, but it's all encompassing in terms of getting that at that base level, saying, y'all can do this, you need to know these types of aspects of this, and then moving forward from there. So
is that course an elective?
It is. It's a graduate level course. So usually the students that I have in there are, they've been out in industry 4 or 5 years. I think that's one of the criteria for them to come back in. So I have this whole gamut of ideas that have come through in terms of this. One may be a drone idea. One was campers on the Flint Hills, you know, in terms of this is the business that I want to start. Some are very specific in terms of, they won't go into a lot of detail in the technology per se, but they want to know that entire framework around innovative ideas and entrepreneurship. So I'm a firm believer in that training and actually exposing potential innovators and entrepreneurs to what they're going to need to know to be able to you know, move them forward, male or female.
I think that would even be beneficial at the undergraduate level,
Yes.
right? I mean,
Yeah,
at
absolutely.
early education.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Oops, I taught for the first time translational bioengineering last term, and we had 3 undergrads and 1 grad student. So hopefully the class will grow.
Yeah.
Hey panel, my name is Curtis Jordan. I'm an intern at Jefferson Lab. So we talked about safe spaces being a place that we can kind of introduce motivation, confidence, things like that. However, I see them as like ponds or lakes separated from the majority of the ocean. So what are some actionable steps that these ponds or safe spaces can take to kind of move those blockages to go from ponds or lakes to like rivers that eventually lead to the ocean? For example, we talked about the patent bias. So how can we target these things or open up these spaces to people or environments that aren't very accepting to kind of influence that change to keep the flow moving?
That's a terrific concept, and I would say that awareness is the first step, and acceptance that it exists is the second step, and then action is the third. So a lot of people aren't aware of this. And the other surprising fact from that Jensen article in 2018 was not only the lack of getting the patent or being cited, it was also the dilution of the patent's impact. So it turns out that women sole inventors' claims, they had many more words added to their claims by the patent examination process than other people with ambiguous names. And what happens, the more words in a claim, the more restricted it is.
The narrower it is.
So if you're having a claim, any polysaccharide mixed into whole blood, that's extremely broad claim. But if you say polysaccharide mixed into blood that must be applied to a cartilage defect in operating room with blah, 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 and it excludes veterinary science, then you've suddenly restricted your picket fence to a very small area.
So I'm big also on safe space sorts of concepts. And with that, it's almost, if you want to, or I believe that individuals, and I talk about these sorts of things in my class, if you're going into this area, if you're looking at innovation or entrepreneurship, it's a dog-eat-dog world a little bit, okay? We're not just talking about getting a publication out. Now we're talking about money. And people, when it comes to talking about money and their financial future in certain ways, they're going to take things a little bit differently. And so it can be very dog-eat-dog. So that's that. So there's a personal aspect. I truly believe in this. And that is, go back to all of your successes and go back and actually believe in what you're doing and what you can do. Then when these storms come up and someone's coming along saying, oh, that's no good, it's like, I don't know if you're right. I think it is good, you know. And so having that ability and gaining, you don't always start with it, but gaining that confidence in each of those, in your areas and in your abilities, I think is one of your best defenses. And sometimes it takes spending some time to look back through. I know I've had storms that have come across with me, and I had to go back and put some things on paper. Wait a minute, you did that well. You did that well. You could do that. And so there's that personal aspect of belief in yourself, and I think that helps a lot of individuals move to new and further horizons. So
I think the terms are pushback and confidence and courage.
But actually going back also to your question, the reason why you have, for example, this bias, it's really speaking out about it and really nipping it in the bud and solving and ensuring that the system does not allow that to take place. I mean, whether it's removing the names during the prosecution process, or really ensuring that those who are really having a look at it are not biasing anything that's there. Because unless you solve it, you know, there's pushback, there's everything else that you can do. But if the system is flawed, you will always have some of that bias there to a certain extent, and you need to root it out. So it's talking about it, it's looking at the data, and every now and then going back to the data and seeing if the steps and the changes that have been put in place are improving the situation.
No, I think you're perfectly right, because part of the pushback is knowing the rules to the game. And if people are unaware that adding words to claims dilutes them,
sure,
they're not going to know to push back on that.
Yep.
Yeah, hi. Eleonora here. I'm an investor in Oxford, but I'm also part of the AUTM 𝗏𝗏 Fellowship. It's not really a question, but it's actually a reflection of from your comments and everything that also happened in my life and also where I come from. I come from Italy. I see that, for example, in Italy, before the 1950s, women couldn't even vote. So, I mean, I'm 35 years old. I didn't see so much of the history of the world, but I noticed that not even in 100 years old, women couldn't even access universities. I think that change is coming, it's just very slow. And regarding to the point of the Slovenian universities, I would be curious to know in these 20 years, how was the progression from year 1 to year 5 to year 20? Maybe, in this 10, 20 application, 18 or 15 were in the last year. So maybe talking about is, awareness, being in a pond in which you can talk about these things freely is empowering people to realize that, well, there's a problem. Maybe I could be part of the, of the solution of the problem. So I think for me, it's very important. I never really thought about this. And is coming to the second point also of different type of education. So Sophie was mentioning that we are very, there are many women in biomedical, but how much are also in finance? I don't know. So another problem that in my history it has come up recently is that I don't have any financial education or just entrepreneurial education. It's really linked to the financial awareness. So just recently I realized, okay, I need also finance acuity to become an entrepreneur or a venture capitalist. And this came up just recently, talking by chance to other people, could be men, could be women. My mentor was by chance a woman. But I think it's, the more we talk about, the more other people is aware, it's very, very important. And yeah, I don't know, I just wanted to put this thought out there and wondering, what do you think about it? Yeah.
I think it's very important to be able to have open and transparent. And I think this idea of a pond, it's a great one, that you're free to discuss things and transmit your ideas and impressions without fear of being judged or excluded. I think it's very important.
So I think right now, as I mentioned, the woman participation in engineering research is already significantly increased. I remember when I joined George Washington University in the Department of Mechanical and Aerospace Engineering, I was the first female faculty member at that time. But right now, we have total 5 female faculty members.
Yay.
So that's pretty great. Yeah, so I think the female faculty member can serve as the role model for our students, not only on the innovation, entrepreneur, and many other aspects. So I think the students would like to talk to the female faculty member, maybe learn from their experience, and also inspire them for their future career. That's very important. Yeah.
So real quick on that, I like your recognition of the fact that you need that additional education in finance. And I think that breadth of understanding this framework of entrepreneurship and innovation, I think that that is something that can be, is very helpful to see where it fits kind of in the context of life and life's operations, in a sense, versus the innovation only aspect of it. So,
Yeah.
And there's another thing I'd like to add, which is something that I got from my readings, was that wealth is a factor in women innovation. And it's for several reasons. One of them is that they cited in a paper from the US Patent Office and Chief of Office of Economics that women inventors, it's a small but significant 4% are more likely to go for a micro entity to help prosecute their patent. Micro entities would include small law firms, universities, as opposed to the bigger firms where they have very highly qualified patent law attorneys. And the other one is simply the demographics of women inventors, which happens to be centered in urban areas. And why would that be? The average salary in an urban area of anybody is much higher than if you live like in the prairies. So this would give the woman more wealth to hire a daycare, to liberate her for the time needed for creative ideas. It's hard to find a creative idea if you have an hour here, an hour there. It requires really sitting down and being able to think continuously about the same thing for at least 4 hours at some point, or 6 hours, or even at 8 hours. And I think that if you're diluted into, parsing your time between all of the responsibilities you have outside of work, it's really difficult to find that time needed for the creative idea.
Are there any questions?
Hi. I appreciate that you're kind of talking about like a kind of bottom-up approach. You're seeing more undergraduate women coming through the system, but maybe I'm impatient and I want to see change now.
Me too.
Yeah. Thank you. And I appreciate what Angie said about kind of maybe removing names from patent applications. And I think that's a good way to like kind of, yeah, okay, yeah. But like kind of what else can we do now? And like, what can we do to make a bigger change?
Well, yeah, and kind of this question feeds on this. What advice do you give people to try to trigger that change now, right? Like,
or for the future?
Yeah.
Because we're coming to the end. So what do you want to see? What should happen now? And what do you want to see in the future?
Well, one thing women can do who are young, don't be afraid to spend money on hiring someone to cook for you in the beginning of your career. Liberate your time to do something else. Don't be afraid to pay for a lawyer that's the most highly qualified. Use your wealth wisely.
So I have one daughter. So I normally right now, so I told her, you can do everything. Yeah, so that's very important. Give you guys the confidence. Our woman inventor, you need to give them the confidence. So you can do everything as man can do. That's very important. Yeah.
I go back to the fact that there weren't even girls' sports in junior high and high school when I started playing sports. So it does take time, and unfortunately, that's the nature of the beast. I would say what you can do now is, in a sense, there are going to be biases, and you are going to see it. So be ready and willing and have the confidence in yourself to fight through them. I wrote letters to the newspaper in the 6th grade wanting girls sports. I didn't have a problem doing it. So continue to stand up for yourself. And this will change as time goes, but it's not changed now. So, my point of view would be you're going to have to take the bull by the horn yourself and make those moves.
Don't accept no.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And don't let it bother you that you're the only one, that you're the only woman in a meeting. Don't let it bother you that you belong there.
Well, we have an all-women panel here, which I'm very proud to be part of. Okay. Did you want
Do
to
we want to put up this slide to allow them to connect to us?
Yes. Yeah. Sure. Okay. Thank you. Sorry, one more question.
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
okay.
go on.
Oh,
We
yes,
can do
Julie.
it. We can do it.
I want to thank you all for an excellent panel. I also wanted to mention, in conjunction with 𝗪𝗻𝐵𝐴 and Angie, the panelists, and it was actually Dr. Hoemann who brought this up, we are compiling a really great composite of various resources and articles. Thank you, Dr. Hoemann, for asking for it. And it's going to be worldwide. And I'm going to post it on the live stream comments and also email it to anyone who's interested. But I wanted to just let you all know that.
No, thank you, Julie. And thank you, everyone, for your attention. What we want to do is keep the conversation going. We need to be the change that we want to see. So it means that we use our platform, use our voice, try and be part of the solution rather than just conforming. It's not right. It's happening, but I agree with Trina. I want it to happen now. I have one daughter, and I tell her that she can do not everything that a man does. She can do whatever she wants to do, because it's not a man's world. It's our world. But let's stay connected. You can see from the QR codes that you can contact any one of us, but let's keep the conversation going. We thank you for your time and your attention.
Yes, I just want to say thank you, everyone here with us in person and live on LinkedIn to celebrate Women Inventors. A very special thank you to our 3 panelists, Dr. Zhang, Dr. Hoemann, and Dr. Cassone. Also, a very special thank you to Angie Miller for co-moderating this panel with me. And then, of course, 𝗵𝗱𝗱 for managing the audience questions. I just have a small token of gratitude from myself and 𝐞𝐦𝐢𝐧 for you guys participating. So thank you all. Thank you all.
And I just want to say that this is the first time that we're having one of AUTM's sessions live streamed. So we thank you all who were there listening and participating. You will be able to come back to this conversation from the link that's there that you joined up with. But we thank you for everything. And Julie, you are a superstar.
Yes, thank you, Julie Savarino. Here you go, Dr.